everyone, this is Kelly, and I am here to take a look at a little deck, and this really is a little deck. It only has 32 cards. And I remember when I saw this, I believe it was a Kickstarter, that is by Jessica Bott, B-O-T-T, this year. You might know her more as the Cracked Amethyst. You can go to her website at thecrackedamethyst.com. I have several of her decks. I have her Plant Tarot. I have her Idiosyncra deck, or Idiosyncra Tarot. I can't remember what that's called. As well as the Oracle that went with that. And I do really love her very rich illustrative style. But I have to admit that when I saw this deck, my first instinct was, whoa, I love that, I need to have it. And then I almost talked myself out of it because I thought, like, what would you actually do with it as as an oracle? But then so it was like this, I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, I've got to back that. And then I was like, do I really need to back that? Like, am I actually going to use that? And then it moved on to very quickly, and like in the same swoop, then it was like, oh yeah, I definitely need that. And then I, backed it. And it must have came, I don't know, sometime in the last few days. I had to go out and get quarters for the laundry today, even though it's a Sunday, and I had to go by the post office. So I stopped to peek in, and because this was little, it, fit in the post office box, and so I was able to grab it. So I thought I would take a look at it with you because I am excited to take a look and give them a good shuffle, so I figured I would walk through it first before I did so. So it is called the Phenomena deck, or it's just called Phenomena and Oracle deck. Again, created by Jessica Bott. It's just in this simple tuck box here, and it says on the back 32 cards with an instruction sheet. And again, the website shows a couple of the cards, printed in China, just kind of your basic information there. So nothing fancy. It does feel like a sturdy box, so that's fine. It's a solid tuck box, and I'm good with it. All right, here are the backs of it. Again, she has quite a what I would call an illustrative style. I don't know what maybe the appropriate terms for her art style is. Obviously we're going to look at it, but it's kind of like vector graphics is also what I would guess, and this is just pure guesstimation, but it has that sort of clean lines, blocks of color, sort of vector graphic look to her art style, and I really enjoy it. I quite appreciate it. I think that backing is gorgeous, especially for what this deck is, which is a deck of like weather phenomena, right? And so we have lightning and rain and clouds and the stars and the sun, and it does look very weather oriented. It only comes with this very little I wouldn't call it a little white book. It was a little instruction sheet, as she calls it, and it says phenomena, plural of phenomenon. Number one, it's an occurrence or circumstance that is observable. And number two, it is something impressive or extraordinary. And so that's all it has, other than a listing of the cards with some keywords for each of the cards. I don't personally think, I think it's nice to have a keyword sheet here, so you can kind of see what you would do with it. I think, they're going to be fairly obvious to me on, how you might work with this. Some of the cards remind me, one of my most used Oracle decks is the Illuminated Earth Oracle, and that has a lot of cards like erosion and eruption and natural earth energy. And one of the things that I love about that deck is just that it really gives us indication of these larger forces of energy that take place, that do have an impact. They're not good or bad. They are simply natural energetic shifts that we have to to be aware of so that we can work with those energies, because they're happening one way or another. And weather is like that, right? What's happening in our atmosphere is something that we have little to zero control over. And so we simply have to be aware that those energies are in place so that we can understand that it is going to be impacting us energetically, and be aware of that and work with it. Get it, take an umbrella to work. The backs seem to be a very dark green. I would say, let me get a white here. Let me get something black. Yeah. I would say that is a very dark green card. Very, very dark green card. And on the front as well. I almost thought maybe it was more like a very dark tealy blue, but that seems to be pretty green. It's darker than this. It definitely isn't a teal though. It's much more of a really dark forest green. And that's got a thin border around it, and then it has that on the back of it as well. And you can kind of see it better here, where you'll see the darker green and then some of the blues in here on the box as well. But it's really gorgeous. I'll have to get a deeper green to edge this with. I was thinking it would probably get edged in black or really, really dark blue, but it's actually a very dark green, and so I would need to get a marker that will be dark like that, because I definitely want to do the edges. So, you know, when I had my thought process of what am I going to do with this, I actually track weather. So about 2 years ago, I was having a conversation with Larissa, who has her Instagram is her Bard's Lament. I don't know if she changed her YouTube channel. I'll have to check it out. I'll put a link below. But her Instagram is Green Witch Homestead, and we were talking about wind patterns, and that our areas have certain predominant wind patterns, and what can that say when in certain times of year those wind patterns really change. And this whole the conversation that we had about it was really intriguing to me. And so for the last couple years, I really pay attention to the direction in which the wind is going that particular day, thinking about humidity, thinking about temperature, understanding if as is the case, I personally believe that energy is very important to everything that I do, both in divination, setting intentions, doing any kind of workings. Energy is important to me. It's why I believe, that we take the time to forecast with divination castings or readings, is because energy is going all around us, and it's not nice and neat. It's often all entangled up, and we're having to sort of work out what's going on. Given the state of the energy, we can kind of forecast where things are going. So I don't really look at predicting. I don't use the term predictions. I do think of it more as forecasting, this idea of weather casting or future casting. If we are understanding of the energy that's at play, we can really start to see where, if we don't shift that energy, it's going to be moving in this direction. Now, we have the freedom of choice for our part in any situation to make shifts in the energy, but if we don't do anything about it, it's kind of moving in this direction. And so I track. I have an app that I use. The one that I settled on, and I really tried quite a few, but the one that I settled on, I can't talk, is this one called, and then it went away too fast for me to see the name of it. Got a chicken on it. It's called Wind Compass. Oops, let me close it. It's called Wind Compass, and you probably can't see it anyways because screens get blown out, in trying to do them on a camera. But why I like this, I tried all different ones, but I really like to see just give me how many miles per hour is it? Are there, there's some gusts up to 8.3 miles per hour. What direction is it blowing to? You can actually change this to point to on the compass where it is coming from or going to, but obviously you're going to see where it's going from and where it's going to, but this is pointing to the direction that it's blowing in. And then of course you get to see the kind of swirling patterns here. And of course you can look at other things like your temperature, and your humidity and all of that kind of stuff as well. But this is just very simple, and it just makes more sense. A lot of the wind apps I found were for people who were fishermen or people who did water sports, or things like that, where they really needed currents and things. And I do like getting the currents as well around in the water sources as well, but that's not something as important to me with what I'm doing here. I'm more interested in the wind, so I like just to be able to open this and get like a straight information that I need out of the gate. So that's the app that I like to use, and I just track it on my calendar. You can also, I know it seems like it's completely out, but you can get sort of a predominant I have a blog post. I will put a link to that blog post where I talked about it a little bit, but it was mostly about something else, and this was but more about this predominant. So in my area, most of the time, the wind is coming from the west, right, and blowing east. And so what I liked, but what's interesting is that from September 1st to September 21st, it most often comes from the south. So there's this chunk of time, which is one of my most favorite times of the year, leading up to my birthday, that I always feel a shift in the energy. It's a very dominant, and so this was a big deal when I was like, oh my goodness, that is so interesting to see that. And it certainly got me on the road to really paying attention to the weather around us is just one more indication of energy that is moving and interacting with us, interacting with the situation, and we can use that in divination. So it just fascinates me. It's something I've been personally tracking over the last couple years. I think it's about 2 years. I looked up the blog post. I think it was in September of 2019. And in fact, I'm doing a little like one-day workshop class about aeromancy, which is looking into using these types of information with divination. So it's something that fascinates me, is my rambling point, right? But so I love the idea. So what this deck then is, so this is why. I know it seems like it had nothing to do with anything, but it does. It's in my rambly way. When my brain was like, oh, that's really cool, my second brain was like, would I use that as an oracle deck? And then my third self was like, well, yeah, you would. You're tracking this stuff. Like, that could be really helpful to bring into a reading. So let's take a look. Again, you saw the back, so you've seen those for a while. Obviously, this first one is a whiteout, right? It's got that energy of the blizzard. Now, I wondered if some of these things might overlap. I'm going to pull that out of the way. It might overlap, where I know we have a fog card and we also have a blizzard, although I think of those things as very different, right? Fog is, and I've certainly experienced both of these in my area of the United States. We have full force seasons with all of the things in force, right? And so, and I also am in going to a cabin that my partner and I have been working on renovating. It's in the mountains, and coming, like, when I leave to come home, if I leave too early, I don't like to leave too late because I have to go through a bigger city that I want to avoid traffic. But if I leave too early, it's so foggy because it's in the Smoky Mountains, and so then it gets really foggy, and fog can be very dangerous when you're trying to drive, but it's also absolutely beautiful. And every morning there is always always fog down into the hollers that are on either side. There's always fog, and watching that fog, you know, get burned off or blow off is just ever beautiful and powerful experience. That's different than a blizzard, right? Because I've certainly been in a lot of blizzards, and that's more you're battling not just the view, right? Just not being able to see clearly, but the elements, right? It is cold, and it is, you know, the snow. Sometimes you get to like a whiteout. Now you can with fog as well. Fog can get to where you just cannot see anything, and there have been at least 2 times, but one time when I was coming home in the mountains where people we just kind of were pulled over and having to really just crawl because you could not see very far ahead at all. So fogs can be quite thick and quite intensive, but there's this added level of stinging snow, and sometimes just this complete whiteout where you can't see anything, and you're in a much more dangerous position in terms of I could stand still in a fog and I wouldn't be in any danger. I just couldn't see my way forward. If I was just standing outside in a blizzard, I am physically in danger of the elements, right? Getting frostbite or you know, something like that. So it does have a differentiation of indications, although both of them I think could have that idea of not being able to see clearly. So I'm going to set that aside until we get to fog, and then we'll look at what the keywords for her keywords are. But there we have blizzard. Well, here, let's take a look at that now, because you probably want to know what kind of keywords are put on there. This is obstruction, blindness, and profusion, so just a lot of snow, right? Versus fog, which has things that are hidden, things that are obscure, and sort of being in an envelope, like you just feel like you're just in this pocket of, that's kind of how I feel. You do have that sense of being, it's a very mystical feeling to be standing outside or in the woods and being surrounded by fog, right? You can't really see, you feel like this sense of isolation, which I do think you feel with the blizzard as well, but there's much more of an obstructive nature to a blizzard. Sometimes you're actually fighting against the wind and the snow, where it's more of a physical obstruction than it is in fog, which is more just visual. So that's the first one. I know it's a lot to talk about a white card, isn't it? There is actually nuance here. I don't know if it's picking it up, but you do have a line between the land and the whiteout of the blizzard. But so in person, it's quite obvious really what you're looking at, and it's not just flat white. So there's that. Here we have crystallize. She has keywords of creation, things solidifying or things becoming, which I think is pretty cool because it really speaks it's not crystal, it's the crystallize. Things are crystallizing. And you can even think of that with like ice, you know, being in that form of crystallizing and turning into something solid, which is really cool. Again, I'm really excited when I quickly look through these. I think these are going to be extremely useful in readings, and I'm really excited to work with them, because think about getting this card that there are things that are crystallizing and that you may need to be aware of that so that you can make sure, is it something that you want to crystallize, right? Or do you need to start putting some heat to the situation so that we don't crystallize here? There's a lot in, I think you could also use these for setting intentions. You could literally, you know, pull a card to represent what you think is happening, and then pull another card for how you might want to affect change upon that. I could see that would also be something that would work really well with a deck like this. Here we have decompose. I love this. We're seeing the act of, you know, of decomposing. Things are decomposing here. They're being broken down so that they can be reused. They're being repurposed as well. And you can really start to see her art style here, and that's sort of what I would think of as like vector graphics. Again, I'm not sure that she works in vector graphics, but that's kind of what it looks like to me. Here we have do. You know, just at first, the day has literally dawning. The dew is still on the web. I think that's really cool. Beginnings, fresh, and purity is what she has. The sun is just coming up. And it does feel like it's that quiet space where everything is just that breath before the day begins. And to drought. Now here we have, you know, energy of drought, lacking, the absence of water, right, of life-giving water. With drought, we have earthquake, that sort of shaking and a big shift, a disruptive energy that's taking place with an earthquake. Again, an earthquake isn't, again, I think that maybe I love this deck already so much because of the illuminated earth, and if you've seen my videos, I have a walkthrough of that. It's also in, I think, some of my favorites because it is a big favorite of mine, and it's this type of energy that an earthquake isn't an evil thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a natural movement of the earth. It is something that happens, right? And yet it can be extraordinarily destructive. And being aware and monitoring for earthquakes saves lives, right? Literally. So it's important to understand the energies that are around us that are disrupting things. Not necessarily seeing them as bad or evil, but just acknowledging that there are bigger forces, and we need to be aware of those so that we can make ourselves safe and or utilize the energy that's there. Here we have erosion. I actually love this card, or I have in that other deck the card erosion is there. This idea that over time, right, things carve out and new landscapes appear is a great power. It's a slow power, right? But it is that slow erosion or completely changing a landscape over time. Here we have fire. This is a very, you know, obviously here we have like a more of a connotation. I'm going to keep out, I'm assuming, let me see, I don't know. I don't think this isn't thinking of this in terms of the 4 elements. Like, I don't think there is, I'm looking here. There's not like a water, fire, earth. This is more about phenomenons that happen. So this is fire and the keywords that she has are wild, ferocious, uncontrolled. So this is really looking at forest fires, something that sparks and happens, again, naturally. I think we think of forest fires as, you know, yes, there are forest fires that are started by idiotic people lighting off fireworks in a dry environment or not properly taking care of campfires, but forest fires happen also naturally through lightning strikes and things like that. It's a phenomenon that does happen and is extraordinarily powerful, but it can also clear out and refresh, and then new forest growth comes after it. So it's the power of fire, not as one of the 4 elements, but in that natural power. Here we have flood here. I really liked the keywords she has here of cover, surround, and swallow up. This is kind of, it just puts this layer. We have no clue what's underneath here. Like, that would be very dangerous to walk in. When I was little, we had a flood in the streets. There was a dip in one of the streets in the apartment that I grew up in, and so we would, as kids, whenever it would rain a lot, that would all flood and we would go jumping in. The water was quite deep, not like to your waist deep, but it was, I would say, parts of it when we were kids were certainly past our knees sometimes. So we would go jumping in the water, and I have a scar on my knee from jumping into the clear flat surface of the water and jamming, you know, a stick into my knee. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool there. Then here we have our fog card, which, as I said, is about hidden, obscure. It softens the edges when you're looking at fog. I really like this sort of out of focus look in these areas. This white out here that softens the edges. I think you could do something with that meaning as well. Here we have fossilized. This is so interesting because, you know, when you think about something like erosion, right, which is sort of an eating away and a taking away over vast amounts of time, or even crystallizing, But it's different when you look at something that fossilizes. It takes something that was living and organic and hardens it into stone and preserves it. You know, that's a different energy than erosion. It's quite, I really like that. She uses keywords of like preservation, and permanence, that I think is really, she also has leaving a mark here. When you look at like fossilized, sometimes things are, marks of the fossils are in other stones, you know, and things like that around it. Here we have frost. This is an interesting one because we think about, you know, like the dew, which is much more fluid and warmer, obviously. And it has, in the deck, it has more about freshness and things like that, but the frost has that kind of feeling of Isa, the Isa rune, in terms of calm and stillness and kind of hitting a pause. Everything is frozen in place, which I think is powerful. We have germinate. This is obviously the first beginnings of growth here, but a lot of growth that's happening because there's all kinds of activity taking place underneath the ground before that sprout even comes up. But it's that first signs of growth happening, which is quite beautiful. Here we have a geyser. This is that, you know, you're just kind of walking through the national park and a giant geyser blows out and scares the bejesus out of you, right? This sudden surprise, but definitely it would be an energy for me of release, this big explosion of energy coming outward. Now, I had never heard of this. So this is Haboob. It looks like Haboob. I'm going to look it up right now. It says intensity, gigantic, and then this also has the term of envelope because I think it just completely envelops you. It looks like a sandstorm. So let's take a look. Okay. Oh, I don't even think you can see it. I looked it up and you can see that there are like sandstorms on all of these images, powerful sandstorms. And it says a violent and oppressive wind blowing in summer, especially in Sudan, bringing sand from the desert. So it does seem to have this idea of a sandstorm that might take place in a very dusty desert area that would, you know, this is very powerful in the ways of a blizzard, but in a different direction. But you think about sand, you know, can cut and literally be so destructive, as well as a complete obscuring of things. So I'm going to, but this, apparently they're huge, and I don't think you can see the images here, but I would recommend looking up a haboob and see, because they do look just massive blowing in. So that is, I thought that was interesting because it was one I was like, oh, I don't even know what is that? Like, I mean, I could tell from looking at it, but I'd never heard the term before. So I'm going to keep this out here and we'll come back to these three in a little bit. Here we have hail, which is interesting because she has curiosity as a keyword. But it definitely has more, it is a curious, we get a lot of hail, anywhere from small to, I have seen hail in big, like, baseball hails before, so we do get hail, and it is so interesting to see. And sometimes you get hail, or sometimes we get hail where you wouldn't think so. Like, it doesn't seem like it's cold enough, but we're still getting hail, and it's like pinging off of everything. And it's extremely destructive to your cars and things like that, and depending on how big they are. But it is one of those things. Like, I've seen tons of hail, but every time it hails, it is always something that you'll see people coming out on their porches and looking at it, because then you just end up with all of these whatever size little balls to large balls on the ground, and it is, you know, so I guess in that sense I can see the curiosity, but it is, I've seen damage to vehicles and things, and it can be extremely damaging as well. So the keywords though that she has is curiosity, a paradox, and aggression. So that's interesting. Again, I would probably just kind of do my own things, but I do think it's great that she at least gives some keywords, because that way if you kind of stumble on one and you're like, I don't even know what I would do with that, it kind of gives you a place to start. I think like working with animal energy, working with natural phenomenon energy is the same. If you go and watch you know, videos and images, and if you can, the actual animal, and see how that interacts with the world around it, you can start to get an idea of what that energy would mean in terms of divination. And the same thing with these types of natural phenomena. Watch videos, or if you've never been in a hailstorm, watch a video about being in the hail and just think about what that might look like. I can think of like stinging energy, as well, to the largeness of, you know, knocking yourself out kind of energy as well. I do like that it's with this really green grass, because that does happen sometimes where you get hail, you know, either in spring or in moving into autumn, where you don't really expect that there, especially in spring, I would say, where everything's getting green, but then we'll get this random hailstorm, right? Here we have a hurricane, power. She has this as power, menacing, and force. Like, it's such a huge force. Not just obviously in the place that the hurricane is, but it has, weather-wise, it has tremendous impacts. While we don't get hurricanes where I am in the United States, we do get the impacts. It's amazing to me that a hurricane that's, you know, down on the coastal areas of Florida and such, or North Carolina, you know, those can be raging down in those specific places, and our weather, all the way up probably into Maine and Canada, are being impacted by that weather pattern. And you can start to see the whole weather pattern start to swirl across the whole of the United States, which is a huge country, or even across the continent of North America. And so it's really powerful to watch, look on radars and watch hurricanes, and not just the devastating force of the hurricane itself, but how much that shifts the energy all around it for a huge space. Here we have a landslide, a collapse, a sudden, and then kind of being at a loss. There's like, what do you, in the middle of a landslide, like what do you do? Like, I watched landslides, both snow, like movies that have like snow landslides, or these types of rock. We see lots of, up in the mountains, we see a lot of where there are landslides that happen, and they get on the highway and they're having to be cleared off. And so, you know, that kind of thing happens. But if you watch movies where there's big like snow avalanches and things like that, like, it is such a, you know, this, it's happening like this, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds of rock and dirt are coming down, or snow, and there's just nothing you can do but get out of the way, right? And again, it's oftentimes that it happens out of the blue. Somebody's just driving along and there's a landslide. Here we have a meteor. She has this kind of set with wishes and lucks and like a shooting star kind of feeling there, where you make a wish. You know, you see a shooting star and you make a wish. Obviously, we know that they aren't actually stars that are falling, but they are meteors, and so that makes sense. But I do like how she, because again, it's a natural phenomenon deck, so she uses meteor instead of the shooting star there, which I like. Here we have rain. I think this is really beautiful. That cleansing, that refresh, the, you know, just kind of now this can go right to the flood, or it can go to the refresh and the beginning new energy, just depending. It's going to also turn into hail, which is oftentimes what happens is we have rain and then it goes to hail and then it goes back to rain. So it's interesting because that's sort of a base state here by itself, but it can lead to flooding and it can lead to other things. It can also, be the end of a drought and be this amazing shift in the energies that is going to provide life again. So it's all, it's so, I really am excited. This is very exciting to me, deck, and I'm really glad that my voice went blop, blop, blop and flipped back to getting it. Here we have a rainbow. I mean, obviously rainbows are very often set with this idea of hope, due to the biblical stories of Noah's Ark. But I think, in many different cultures we have this. I mean, I just think it's hard for anybody, no matter what country you're in. If you see a rainbow, I just feel like you're always going to see that as a good sign. Follow the rainbow to the end of the rainbow to find your pot of gold. If you haven't seen Finian's Rainbow, I think it's the last movie that Fred Astaire made. You should watch it if you like musicals. But Look to the Rainbow is a favorite song of mine, right? So, the storm is over, the rain has stopped, and there is this sort of slash of color in the sky. I love to see any rainbow, but double rainbows are amazing. If you've ever gone to a large waterfall, certainly at Niagara Falls, at certain times, you'd see multiple rainbows, and that's really amazing as well. We have smoke here. And this is interesting because smoke is the keyword she has are consequence, difficulty, and exacerbation. So it exacerbates the problem. This is very different, right, than fog. I love that you kind of get almost like a mirror image. It flipped and then this kind of red tone over it, but I really like that because fog is different. Like fog, especially like I said in the mountains, it's just there every morning, and certainly longer than the morning depending on the weather, but it's there every morning, again in the Smoky Mountains. And so versus smoke has, this does not cause you to have any breathing difficulties or anything. It doesn't affect the air quality. Whereas smoke, this is something that is actually a consequence of a forest fire or a consequence of really even pollution and other things of that nature. And it's really going to cause difficulties in breathing, and I'm sure all kinds of things that smoke can cause problems with. So this is sort of a fallout, right, of that energy of fire or something happening, and the consequence that can linger a long time after the fire is gone. So I think that is really cool and quite different than something like fog. Here we have snow, tranquil stillness and silence. Now we had some, let me see, I think it was frost, stillness, calm, and pause. I feel like frost is different because there is that just freezing, everything just stops, and that frozen quality. Snow isn't the same thing, and I can see where you can really use this as just this idea of quiet tranquility and sort of putting a coating over everything. There is something amazing about the first snow. There is just something amazing about snow at all, when it's just, you get this, you wake up to the world just covered in snow, and the snow is falling, and there is just such a cleanness, right? Everything that, all the muck and the mire and the dirt and the litter on the ground, like everything is just covered up, and for a while you just can sit and have a moment to breathe and just have this sense of cleanness. All of the stuff underneath is still there though, and that's the difference there. It's all still there, but we have that moment of just this beautiful silence. I really love, I've always said, you know, obviously by February and March, we're in the north, we're getting tired of snow, but I would never really want to live in a place in which never had snow, because I do really love what that's like to step outside when the snow is falling and it's just quiet and white and beautiful and cold, but not like in blizzard conditions. Here we have the storm energy outburst. This does say threat on it, you know, electricity. Obviously you can be struck by lightning. I know people who have been struck by lightning. But it also puts a lot of good, and I'm not a scientist, I don't know if it puts good ions in the it puts good energy, infuses the air around it with energy that is good for things to be growing. It definitely charges the atmosphere around it. I think that that's very useful to have in a reading. Here we have the sun. Do we have the moon as well as the sun? This is alphabetical. No, we just have the sun for clarity, warmth, and energy. We have a sundog here. This is phenomena. This is seen as a warning or an omen or a sign. So let's look this up. So I've looked this up and it's really cool. Like, I would definitely, again, look these up and look at some of the images. A sundog, also called a mock sun or a parhelion, don't quote me on that, atmospheric optical phenomenon appearing in the sky as luminous spots 22 degrees on each side of the sun and at the same elevation as the sun. Usually the edges closest to the sun will appear reddish. This kind of looks like a rainbow, but it definitely, you can see the red on the inner circle there. And it does talk about them being beautiful, but that they are indicative of foul weather ahead. So I can see why using this as a warning makes a lot of sense. Here we have a supernova, explosive, radiating, and extraordinary. Obviously, it's something that explodes in the middle and then it radiates outward on a massive, you know, universal level, you know, versus, and obviously this isn't going to have that direct a consequence energetically on our physical environment like something like a hurricane. Here we have a tides. I think it says tide here, but it says tides in the guidebook. Cycles, predictable change. These are tide pools that obviously shift and change predictably. They have their tide patterns that we want to pay attention to, so we can go in and utilize into the tide pools, and then those are going to get covered up again. But it is something that is predictable, and it speaks to those more predictable cycles than something like a supernova or a lightning storm or a hailstorm. This is something that is a predictable shift. Here we have a tornado. Chaos, upheaval. I would definitely see this more as upheaval when I look at other types of storms that we see here, because you do, you know, have that. If you ever watched, is the movie called Twister? I think the movie's called Twister. That will, yeah, that one's a good one for tornadoes. If you've ever, I have had certainly been around tornadoes. When I was very young, a tornado went right down the streets of my grandparents where we were living, and ripped up trees, and it literally sounded like a freight train was driving down the street. And other tornadoes, smaller tornadoes, have been around. They're really frightening, right? Because they just kind of hop around, and you don't know where they're going to strike. They have that power just to suck things up, but also whip things out, you know, and just the destruction and the chaotic destruction of a tornado is really scary. I mean, the same thing I'm sure with the hurricane. It's different, right? That's on water, and that usually starts over water. Obviously, impacts the land, but whereas this is going to take place on land. We have a tsunami. This is a complete overwhelm, right? So if you have a flood, that's one thing, but a tsunami is a complete overwhelm, and she has this as catastrophic, and again also having continuing repercussions with a tsunami. We have a volcano. Actually, it looks, obviously these last couple are major storms. We have a volcano. This is much more about, she has this as creative, destructive, and altering. It completely changes the landscape. It creates islands in the water, right? It creates, it changes the complete face of things in a much faster moment than something like erosion. And then we just have the energy for wind, which I love because that is something that I specifically track for, is wind patterns. And so I love that there is a card for wind, and she has movement, change, and sort of that elusive. If you think of trying to catch something that is grabbed by the wind and you're trying to scramble to catch it, there is that elusive nature. You can't capture the wind. So I do like that keyword. So that ends the last one. There are only 32. Let me scooch up here a little bit more. So like I said, fog, blizzard, and even the haboob do seem like they're similar, but I don't think these are similar. Like this has a different connotation to it than fog, which has a different connotation to blizzard, and blizzard definitely has a different connotation to it than just snow. And so I don't think that these are overlapping. I think that you would be able to get a different read from them depending on what you got. So what do you do with something like this? What I don't see myself doing personally is taking this and pulling 3 cards and doing a reading that way. And that was my first, like, oh, this is really cool. And then my second was, I don't really see that working as just pulling for, 3 cards for a reading. And then, of course, the third one being like, yeah, but, yeah, but there's other things to do with that, right? And so I personally, now other people might do walkthroughs, and they're going to end up using this, just like you would use any kind of a reading. But I don't really see myself pulling Decompose, Hail, and Wind, and then it's so pretty though, isn't it a gorgeous deck? And then just doing a reading based off of this. I see this more like you're going to your app in the morning and you're going to see what the weather's like, right? So I really see this being useful if you're doing it at the beginning of a reading to check the weather of the situation. You're going to go in and check and see what do you need to be aware of about the weather in the situation, or what energy do you need to bring. Oops, I'm sorry, I put that right off of the thing. And then going forward and do the reading. So if the energy is getting ready to get frozen, right, to have that moment of frost, we can utilize that frozen state to make plans for the future. We can get some hot water and start to thaw things out, just depending on what the situation's at hand. But we can kind of get a weather indication of the weather going on around a particular reading situation, and then do the reading and get the message. I also see this for myself as utilizing very much for casting, and you've all seen this on various other things, so this isn't anything new or exciting that I do, but I do love to take a card like we did with the mini decks, and so you are going to pull your card to get a big picture of the energy surrounding you or the situation that you need to be aware of for some reason, and then pull out your runes, or pull out your whatever your preferred casting is, and you know, that's the big energy that's at play. You know, then pull, you know, whatever you're going to play, pull and do your reading, cast your reading on top of it. So you've got your big energy forecast of what's going on around. What does that look? Because remember, this is phenomenon. This is natural phenomenon. Where this is an understanding that this isn't about the individual, just me aspect, but it's understanding that there are bigger energy patterns at work, and understanding what those are can help us as then we navigate the more specifics of our situation. So again, using this, then pulling runes, journey tokens, OMs, charm casting, whatever kind of casting that you like to do on top of it, this is definitely a way that I will be utilizing it. The other thing is, you know, pulling for intentionally, right? So let's say you are, you know, in the midst of a situation and you want to bring about growth, right? But let's just say you feel like you're in the midst of drought, right? So you could do a couple things. You could say, okay, I am in a drought right now, and I really need to manifest some new beginnings, right? I really would like some things to start to grow and to germinate. And so you might pull, this is what the situation is, this is where you're trying to get to, and what does that need? That needs some rain to come in to cause this to germinate. And then you might light some candles, you might do some sigil working, like whatever you want to do on top of it. I really think to pull into intentional working, because I do like to use cards. A lot of times people will use tarot or oracle to lay out when they're setting out their intentions of what they're trying to do, and I think that this could be really prescriptive. You know, you want to crystallize something into being, and so then you might pull in frost, right? If I'm really trying to crystallize an idea or a business or something to happen, you know, then I might pull in the energy of frost. I might pull in a rune for Isa there to pull that in. I might pull, you know, draw a sigil of Carcer to lock in the energy, lock down the energy of what I'm trying to do, and kind of use it as a part of magic making or intention setting, however you utilize that type of thing. I think this could be really useful in something like that, where you're setting out either the energy as it is and seeing how to change that, or both, or just the energy as you want it. So using the growth one, or sometimes using a tornado, you just need to go in and obliterate and really shake up and disrupt the current energy that's at, you know, whatever it is. So you might use it that way as what you're trying to, what energy can you bring into a situation to make it better or rectify it or get it loosened up so that you can work with it. Or that, again, that like final, like if you're looking to use the rainbow or to set a wish, intention for a wish, or if you're wanting the fresh beginnings, you know, that kind of thing. I think utilizing it in an intentional, picking out those cards for setting specific intentions or spell work or whatever you call that, or however you work with energy in that way. I think this could be very well utilized in that way, and that's something I do with cards, and so I think that this is going to be very, very useful for that. So again, I don't see myself ever just taking this and pulling 3 cards, but for getting checking the energetic weather, bigger picture energy that I need to be aware of in a situation, and then doing another kind of reading to get into, okay, now what are we going to do about this? How do I utilize this energy? Because it doesn't just have to be negative, right? So if you get a card like fire, okay, there's some big, powerful destructive but cleansing energy available. So I either need to figure out how to sidestep this and avoid it because it's coming, you know, I can't put it out by myself. Or how can I utilize that? How can I harness that energy? And so I might do a reading on how can I harness this energy for cleansing and sort of clearing up the debris, right? So I don't see like big, what seems to be negative natural energy as something that is just bad, but it is just, it's there. It is energy that's there that I cannot change, right? I don't have the power of weather control. And so how am I going to either get myself safe and in a position where I can weather the storm, or how can I also utilize that energy, understanding that it's there one way or another. So how can I harness that energy and utilize it in whatever situation I'm doing a reading on? So I wouldn't, again, look at getting a hurricane necessarily in a weather checking as like, oh, this is a bad energy. And I think that's really important with this type of deck as well as the Illuminated Earth deck. These are looking at phenomena that are outside of this idea of good and bad. They just are big energy patterns that exist, and we can either, you know, utilize them or get out of the way and get safe from them, but because they're happening one way or another. So anyways, I hope this has been interesting. I'm excited to work with this. I think for me personally, with the way in which I do pay attention to weather for divination and things of that nature for myself energetically, I think that this is going to be extremely useful, and I really look forward to working with it. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.